Hello guys, today we'll be talking about introduction of functions and transformations. So let's start with introduction of functions. First of all, what does f of x means? And no, that is not f times x, that's called f of x. And that means for every x we have, there's only one y. So let's take an example. What do you guys think about this graph? First of all, to check if this is a function, there's something called the vertical line test. And that is simply drawing unlimited vertical lines to see if one of them passes through 2 points in this graph. And here we can see that it's even passing the line 3 times, one time here, one time here, and one time here. And same for the others. Okay, so let's check the types of functions. First, we have the constant function, which is a horizontal line. And what is actually interesting here is that whatever point you choose to check, it will always have the same y value. So we can say it has horizontal lines. And this we said is the constant. Alright, let's look at the second type of function, which is the linear function. Linear. So the features for this function is that this function is a straight line. And since it's a straight line, we should know that all slopes on this line should be the same. It has constant slopes. And as we can see, it's meeting the origin, which is 0, 0. And this line has a slope of 1. Third type of functions is the absolute value, AB. And this is the V function, V-shaped function. And it has a vertex of 0, 0 as well at the origin. And this has constant slope as well, since it's 2 straight lines. And last, we have the famous quadratic function, and this has a U-shape, as we can see, U-shape, and vertex at the origin of 0, 0. And a changing slope, as we can see. This is not a straight line. This is like a U line or curve, so this has changing slopes at each point. So let's type changing. Slopes. You can pause the video whenever you want and make notes. Now, when talking about transformations, there's some terms you should be familiar with. First of all, we have the horizontal translation, sometimes called HT. Second, you should be familiar with vertical translation, and you might see that as well as VT. Third of all, you might see vertical or horizontal stretch or compression, and sometimes people call compression as shrink, and that's exactly what it does, but just different names. And last thing, you should be familiar with the reflections, whether it was over the x-axis or over the y-axis. Let's move on. Let's see an example. Y equals x squared. And this is transferred as follows. So y equals negative 3 x plus 7 squared minus 8. First of all, we have to know the general formula very well. So y equals, and I prefer you writing this. A x minus h squared plus k. So first thing first, to be able to solve and substitute into the general formula, we have to find these variables. So we have here a, which equals to -3, which is this number right here. And now we have to find h. And since we have x plus h equals 0, and moving h to the other side becomes -h equals x. So here we have h equals -7. And let's remove this. And k equals -8. So I wrote them back here. So let's graph this first function first so we can see how it looks like. We know this is a quadratic formula, so it should be something like this. And simply what we do next is to see how it's transformed. So we draw the x-axis and the y-axis. So we figure out that h is -7, and that states the horizontal translation. So we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And we have -8 for k, which is the vertical translation. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And here exactly they will meet. Right here. And then we can see that a has a negative component. So we know for sure that it's gonna be pointing down. And number 3 isn't between 0 and 1. So it should be a vertical stretch, and it's pointed to the opposite side of the original function. Okay, so let's see a harder question. So the question says, a function y equals f of x is transformed and its image equation is y equals -2f 3x plus 15 plus 4. Identify the transformations which have been applied to y equals f of x and describe the transformation using mapping notation. First thing first, you should be familiar with this equation, which is y equals a f b x minus h plus k. We'll make this a little bit smaller. And let's find what we actually need like we did in the last example. So first thing first, we need a, which is equal to -2. And then we need b, which here is factored. So we should do 3x plus 15. And when you factor, it's like you're saying this whole thing is over 3. So this becomes 1, and this 15 here becomes 5. So it simply becomes 3x plus 15. And here, don't forget that we need h. So when h goes to the other side, we said after the equal sign. So this should be, sorry, it should be 5 here. So it should be -5. So here we have b equals to 3. And then we have h, which equals to -5. And then k, which equals to simply only +4. Let's make this smaller too. So these are actually the steps that you should be doing in the quiz. Second thing, you should be familiar with the mapping notation, which is x, y coordinates being transformed to x over b plus h, comma, AY plus K. So all we do now is plug in the numbers. Now all we do is X, Y equals, and this becomes 1 over 3x. I'll change the colors so I can explain this. So an explanation to this is when you say x times 1 over b, that equals 2x over b. And that's exactly what we want. So when you plug in the 3 here, it becomes 1 over 3x. When there's no sign here, that means it's multiplied. Let's continue. H is a negative value, so we put negative 5, comma. A is negative 2, y plus 4. Okay, so now let's list the transformation. So first for A, we said that A was negative 2, so that means it was reflected on the x-axis, or about the x-axis, we can say. For example, let's pretend this was a quadratic function, so it's reflected like that. So we say it reflected on the x-axis or about the x-axis. So it's actually on it, so you don't get confused. And that is a vertical reflection, so we say vertical reflection about x-axis. Let's fix that. And now, since a is not a fraction, and what I mean by that, it's not a number that is between 0 and 1 or 0 and negative 1, so it should be a vertical stretch. And we say by a factor of 2. Because we already stated the reflection up there for the negative, and now you just say by 2. And we only say that for the stretches and the compressions. Now for B. B is non-negative, so we don't have any horizontal reflections, but we have horizontal stretch by a factor of 1/3. So we say horizontal stretch by a factor of, good. And now for H and K, so we know that these are horizontal and vertical translations. So we see that H is negative 5, so we say left 5 units. And for K, it's positive 4, so we say up 4 units. For H, you might want to say it's translated horizontally to the left 5 units. And for K, you might want to say it's translated vertically up 4 units.